stuff.
Yeah.
And after all of that, you, unless I'm forgetting anything, you moved on to speak about Isaiah 42.
Right. Yeah. Exactly correct. I think you've got the timeline largely in place.
Yes.
There's a few things I think we need to kind of establish. We said that in order for a prophet to be a prophet, or that there's a new prophet coming after Moses, or we believe Jesus as well, obviously you don't. But if there's a new prophet, he has to fulfill certain biblical criterion.
Yes.
And we said that for one, he has to preach in one God, worthy of worship, right?
Indeed.
And that's something you agree, you admit that is something which the Prophet Muhammad did do. He spoke about one God worthy of worship. There's no controversy there.
There is a slight controversy,
yes.
but not a large one, which is the issue as to whether or not Muhammad preached divine simplicity or not. Right?
Well, no.
Of course, you as a... Did you say you're an Athari, did you say?
Well, yeah, largely, yeah.
As an Athari, of course, you do not believe in divine simplicity.
Well, no, I mean, here's the thing. Within Judaism and Christianity, these things are not even believed in. There's no unanimity or consensus there anyway. So
in Judaism, yes, there is.
I don't think there is.
There aren't any rabbis that I've ever heard of.
All right. Well, let me ask you.
That have not held of divine simplicity.
Well, depends on how you define divine simplicity. Let me ask you a question. Do you believe God is merciful?
Depends. Right? What do you mean by
Is God powerful?
Again, it depends what you mean by God is something, right?
Okay,
when we say that God is something, are we saying that God possesses an attribute?
Yes.
Or are we simply describing God? Right?
Both of it. What you've just said here are the same thing.
No. There's two things. There's either he possesses attributes, right, that are distinct from him, i.e. from his essence, or
no, but now you've put a spanner in the woodworks, yes. Because now you're asking whether the distinction between the essence and the attribute. But that's not my question to you.
Okay, fine.
My question to you simply is it intelligible to you? Is it befitting for me to describe God as all powerful? Yes or no?
It is befitting, yes.
Yeah, okay. And so is this an intelligible meaning? Is God's power differentiated from his knowledge?
No.
So, okay, that means to say in your understanding that when I say God is all knowledgeable, proposition 1, and I say God is all powerful, proposition 2, that both of those propositions are the same.
Sort of, and I'll explain why.
Okay.
I'll explain why.
Yeah.
Because the first word of each of those statements, God, in Jewish terms, means both of those things, right? God is in essence all-powerful and is in essence all-knowledgeable.
What does that mean?
That means that there is no distinction between...
No, when you say... Sorry, I don't think you understand my question. When you say God is all-powerful, what do we mean by God is all-powerful? What are we trying to communicate here?
It means that he has no limits into what he can do.
Okay, and when we say he's all-knowledgeable, what does that mean?
It means he has no limits in what he knows.
Okay, so these two things are different, right?
On a human level, yes.
Okay, good. So that's now you've just denied that reading of divine simplicity, which indicates that different attributes are all the same. We actually, by the way, just so this is something similar to what we have a group in Mu'tazila
yes,
group.
We agree with them.
Fine. Nevertheless, whether you agree with them or not, you've still not been able to solve this issue, which is that when we communicate in human language, and we say that, look, God is all powerful, that means he has no limits to what he can do. Okay, obviously except for the impossible things and stuff like that, which we've spoken about before. And when we say he's all knowledgeable, that means he's got no limits to his knowledge, meaning that there's no ignorance of God, there's no ignorance attribute to God. Now, in those two things, in human language that I'm speaking to you now, are intelligible to us as distinct features of God's, or attributes of God. So, would you agree with that or not?
Not necessarily, and I'll tell you why.
Okay.
Because knowledge in itself is a power. I'm sure you would agree.
No, we're talking about two different things here.
Yeah, because when we say that God is all-powerful, he is limitless, right? Part of the fact that he is limitless, there is nothing he cannot do, is that he cannot not know.
But what you're showing an overlap in two attributes is not you showing that these two things are the same. You're showing an aspect of overlap. You're not showing that there are two distinct things in all cases. For example, is God alive?
Is God alive?
Yes. Does God have life?
Have life? That's
yes.
What does that mean besides just being
put
sad?
life to the side.
Besides just being sounds, what does that mean?
Okay, let me ask you a question. Can God hear?
Again, besides just being sounds, what do you mean?
Besides being sounds.
Yes.
No, we're not talking about besides sounds. Because hearing is.
I mentioned this in part 2 because you brought up, what do you think about the Christians and the Trinity? And I said, well, you said, can God be a man? I said, well, it's just sounds. It doesn't mean anything. The same applies here. When you say, can God do this? Can God do that? It's got to make sense.
No. I didn't say, can God do this or can God do that? I said, is God. Oh yeah, I said, can God hear?
Yes.
All right, so is God hearing? Is God all hearing?
Is God all hearing?
Yeah. Okay.
Is there anything that God cannot hear?
Okay, no. Yeah. No, good, great, good. Now we're talking, yeah? Now we're talking, Josh. Let me ask you another question. When the Bible says, Shema Israel, Adonai Elohim Adonai Echad, yeah? When it says that God is Echad,
yes.
What does that mean?
It means that there is no plurality.
All right, so there's no plurality, there's God one.
Yes.
So one of the attributes of God is oneness, correct?
No, it's not an attribute.
Oh, so what is it then?
It's his very essence.
Okay, no. But we're describing his essence now, if you want to call it that, for the sake of argument. Can God be described as being one or not?
Of course.
Of course. Okay, so God is not two.
God is not two. That's what we mean when we say God is one.
So if God
there is no plurality.
No problem. So if God is one, is the way that we describe God with oneness the same or different to the way we describe God as being all knowing?
Repeat the question.
Is the way in which we describe God as being one the same or different to the way in which we describe God as being all knowledgeable? Is it the same? Are we talking about the same thing, or are we talking about different things?
We are in fact talking about the same thing. And
the
reason is because the idea of oneness of God, i.e. the lack of plurality to God, is intrinsically the same as his limitless. And if there are no limits to God.
So you're saying God is speaking in tautology in the Bible?
No, God is speaking in human terms in the Bible.
No, listen, this is what I'm saying. You're saying God is speaking, when God says that he is one, Echad,
yes.
Or when he says that he is all, or that he knows all, or that when he sees all, or that all of these things.
The third one, there isn't actually a verse.
Okay, fine. That he knows all, or that he's all powerful.
There isn't that also is not said.
So God is not described with power in the Bible, in the Old Testament.
He's not described with all power. He's described with power.
Okay, great, no problem. Now we're playing semantics. You agree that God is all powerful, meaning there's no more powerful than God, right?
I agree with you.
Okay, no problem. So when God is described with power in the Bible, is that the same or different? You said the same as the oneness. Now what I'm saying is, if that's the case, then God is speaking in tautology. It's meaning that he's saying the same thing twice in different language. Which means that there is a superfluous addition to the way in which God is describing himself. Number one. Number two is, you actually admitted in this discussion that when we say God is all knowledgeable, versus, which means that there's no limits to his knowledge, versus God is all powerful, which means that there's no limit to his power, let's say, except for that which is impossibly understood, like can God create rocks so heavy conundrum, which is nonsense, we would say. That those two things are different. You did say that.
I did say that. I'd like to retract that.
You want to retract that?
Because I now see that's actually not actually true.
Okay.
Because as I said after that,
yes,
the knowledge is a power.
I'll allow you to retract that, but I want you to think about and ponder over why it is that you accepted that in the first place. Now, do you know why you accepted it in the first place? Let me speculate, Josh. Let me speculate, Josh. I'm telling you what you think.
This one, right?
No, let me speculate, Josh.
Speculate, Mohammed.
I think the reason why you decided to say that there is a difference in our intelligible understanding of the proposition that God is knowledgeable, or that there are no limits to his knowledge. God is power, there are no limits to his power, because they are describing two different things. Now you're saying, actually, I want to retract that statement, and I want to say that there are limits. The reason why you're doing that is not because of the logical argument presented in front of you. It is simply because you are trying to squeeze divine simplicity. You are trying to squeeze this idea that there are no actual attributes of God into the biblical discourse. There is nothing in the Bible, and I'll challenge you, in fact. Let me challenge you right now, Josh. There is nothing in the words of Moses or in the words of any of the prophets in the Hebrew Bible all 22 books in which you believe, 24, in which you believe, that says that what you're saying now. There is not one verse that says in the way in which we should understand the attributes of God should be anything other than a prima facie understanding. There's nothing at all. You are inventing that. That's something. Yes, you are. It means yeah, it means like apparent. That when God says that it's like echad, yeah, we take that on face value. We don't try and manipulate that. So anyway, that's the first thing. Second, sorry. Now let's get to the point, because we could talk about this all day. You can respond. You can respond. You can respond.
You may be slightly correct in your assumption that on a prima facie reading of the Tanakh, that one does not necessarily come to the conclusion of divine simplicity. You may be slightly correct on that. But the problem is, there is no such thing as a prima facie reading of the Tanakh, because a prima facie reading of the Tanakh on its without anything else is something you cannot read. There are no vowels. There is no meaning. No. It necessitates an oral law.
You've misunderstood.
An oral Torah, and in the oral Torah we have descriptions of divine simplicity. Right? Yeah. The Rambam brings this down, right? And he's not the only one. The Chovas Halevavos brings this down. It's very clear from Rabbi Shora, right? Brought down in the Torah Shabbat Peh, that this is an essential principle of belief in God.
Okay, no problem. I'll just ask you one question and then we'll move on to the next bit, because I'll remind you of something. I said to you, I'm going to find you something in the Talmud to explain to you that the authors of the Talmud in fact said that when the final prophet comes, that when he does come, he's going to come having the ability, or through God, to abrogate the law. I have found this in the Torah.
Okay.
In the Talmud, sorry.
Let's see.
I have found it, but before I present it to you, because you said to me last time, from what I remember, that if I find you this evidence, that you will accept the evidence, and by implication, this means that you will accept the only one thing that was stopping you from recognizing the Prophet Muhammad as a final prophet was indeed this part, which is that he cannot abrogate the law, and that the law should not be abrogated. So, on your understanding, if I'm able to provide you evidence from the Talmud, which says exactly what I've just said to you, you should accept my argument as at least one reading which is legitimate within the scope of Jewish law. Number one.
If you bring me evidence.
Yes, I will.
If you bring me evidence.
Yes.
Which is indisputable.
Yes.
Which is the way that we have classically understood this piece of Talmud.
Yes.
And fine. Then
you accept it. Okay, remember that. Now, before I go and proceed and present, this evidence, I want to first challenge you one more time, last time, final time, on the issue of divine simplicity.
Yes.
My question to you is just one question, which is that how is it conceivable, intelligible on a rational level, that something which is referred to in a certain language, let's say it's intelligence or knowledge, the knowledge of God, is the same as something which is understood in a completely different way? I want you to explain to me if, and you did accept this conditional, knowledge is described, or all knowledge is described as the lack of ignorance, and that power is described here is the lack of limitation. That how are you making these two things, which are clearly definitionally different from one another, one thing? How is it conceivable that these two things, which are definitionally understood differently, can be seen as the same thing?
Because one actually subsumes the other. This is what I was trying to get at before, right? The limitlessness, the all-powerfulness, subsumes the lack of ignorance and the all knowledge.
But what you've just
one subsumes the other. So all knowledge is simply subsumed into the category of all power.
All right. So
lack of ignorance is subsumed by limitlessness.
Okay. Let me come back to you. In fact, what you've just said there is incriminating.
Why?
Is intellectually incriminating.
Why?
The reason why what you've just said there is nothing but intellectually incriminating is because to say something X is subsumed by Y is to indicate the differentiation between X and Y. Meaning, if I say the mother or the baby is contained within the mother's stomach, that is to distinguish between the baby and the mother. You cannot say something is subsumed by something else unless something else exists in the first place. So that's done. That's actually
not necessarily
no.
True.
That's done, Josh.
No,
it's
not true.
It's an entailment.
Not true.
Yes, it is.
Not true.
Unless it's tautological. The only other way is that it's tautological. And if it's tautological, that means we're describing the same thing. Do you know what a tautology is?
Yes, a tautology is where you say one thing and then you basically say it again, but in slightly different language.
Okay.
In a way that
Yes.
you're simply repeating yourself.
So if you say that God's knowledge is the same as God's power, and you're saying they're the same thing, they're the different language, there's only one option for you if you're saying that they're not different, which is that they are tautological. That when God speaks about knowledge, he is speaking about power, and when he is speaking about power, he's speaking about knowledge, which of course would corrupt the meaning, corrupt not only the prima facie meaning, but any type of reading of the Hebrew Bible. Because if you understand it that way, that means when God's speaking about things which are applied to knowledge, and then he references his knowledge, that he's actually referencing his power, and vice versa. And so there is not even one master key category or one master key attribute which everything must be so-called subsumed by. Because then one could argue, what about the will of God? The will of God, is the will of God different, or is it differentiated, or is it similar, or is it different to the power of God? Because the will, and I think we agreed on this beforehand, will is the choice to do A over B or B over A. That's what will is. Having choice and will means that you have an ability to choose A over B.
You have the power to choose A over B.
No problem.
Yes.
But if I say that he has the ability to choose A over B, that's referencing a different state of affairs to just saying that you have power. It's conceivable, therefore, to have power without will.
No,
But it's not.
You can't be all-powerful and yet have power which is lacking.
I didn't say all power. If you listen to what I just said, I said it's conceivable for something to have power but not will. Like, I'll give you an example. This mobile phone right now, this mobile phone has power. Would you agree? Everything you would agree.
Yes.
All right. So if this mobile phone has power, it has no will. It's not volitional. It cannot choose A over B, unless, of course, I decide for it. So in other words, it has no decision-making ability. However, it has power. So it's conceivable that something can have power but no will. But it's not conceivable that something can have will but no ability. Unless, of course, we're talking about something which is not in the realms of that which is conceivable. Yeah.
Will and no ability. So someone in a comatose state.
Say again?
Someone in a vegetative.
Yeah, vegetative. Yeah.
Locked-in syndrome. Sorry.
Yeah.
They might have their will, but they have no ability to.
Yeah. So in the vegetative state, they have no will at that point when they're in that state.
No, but there are the conditions where a person.
Yeah, they have no will at that point.
No, they do have will, but they have no way of. They can sometimes move their toes, and that's it.
Okay. Yeah.
They don't have any power.
If they can move it, then they've chosen to move it, which means they're not fully vegetative. Yeah. But do you understand what I'm saying right now?
I understand what you're saying. 2 points to counter to the things that you said.
Yeah.
Number one, you said
What's the nice camera?
but I'll go in reverse order. The second thing that you said just now was that the ability to choose is not the same. So you said it is conceivable that one can have power without will, like the mobile phone, right? However, that's not what we're talking about when we talk about God. We're talking about all-powerful. We're talking about limitlessness, which means that there is all power, which includes the power of choice, the power of will, right? And back to the previous thing which you said, which was you raised an objection about tautology, and you said, well, then we'll have superfluous words in the Bible. Well, that's also not true, because we have a dictum in Judaism called Torah dibra b'lshon bnei Adam. The Torah speaks in the language of people. In order to people to understand what exactly we mean when we say God is limitless, we then need to give certain descriptions in order to understand what he is not.
Okay.
Right? We needed to understand that there is no plurality, and therefore it uses the word echad, one. We needed to understand that there is nothing beyond his knowledge, and therefore we had to use phrases like Hashem Yodea Kol Machshavos Libo, or stuff like that. Hashem knows all the thoughts of the man's heart. Right? It's teaching us lessons.
I appreciate what you're saying, Josh. However, having said that, you have provided no defense for your position.
Yes, I have.
And no problem. You have tried to defend yourself. let's let the people at home decide whether or not it's satisfying or whether they're convinced. That's no problem.
And of course, you're saying that because you have no effective way of defending against that.
The burden of proof is upon the one that's making the claim.
You're telling a claim.
My claim is that when you're definitionally saying that something is not ignorant, and that's what knowledge is, or it's all knowledge is that you're not ignorant. If something has no limits, and that's what power is. Something has the choice to do A over B. That's what choice is. You're effectively talking about three different state of affairs. Do we say that God can make a choice A over B? Yes or no? Okay. Do we say that God does not have ignorance?
Correct.
Okay. So the God knows things. Yes.
Correct.
Okay. Are we saying that God also is powerful in the sense that He has no limitations to His power from the things which are possible?
Of course.
Okay. Now,
are those first two things powers?
No. What I'm saying is my sentence A, B, and C? Did I say the same thing or did I say different things?
B and C, sorry, A and B were different things.
Okay, great.
That are included within C.
No problem. Included within it doesn't mean it means, by the way, it's distinct from it. But if you're saying fine, no problem. Sentence B and C you said were different. Was my sentence B and C?
Sorry, A and B. A was will, choice.
Okay.
B you said was knowledge. C
you said was power. Are they same or different? A and B are separate things within C. How we defined A and B, you said is separate to C, right?
Correct.
All right. So in other words, if I were to...
A and B are not separate to C. A and B are separate from each other, but
great.
within C.
No problem. A and B are separate from each other. You heard it here first. No, you said it, yeah?
Yes.
Okay. So that means to say that when I describe God's power, I described it in different terms to the way that I described His choice. Correct?
No, you...
Will.
No, when you described His knowledge, you described it in different terms than His choice.
The will, no problem. Fine. So God's knowledge is different to God's will.
Yes.
Excellent. That's all I want you to say. You've just destroyed your own premise of divine...
I have not.
Yes, you have.
I have not. And the reason I have not is because I have said that those two things, which from a human understanding are separate things, because they are both examples of power. Okay. These are both descriptions of power.
No problem. But they're separate.
And God is, by essence,
they're separate
limitless.
articulations of how we describe the functionality of God, if you want to put it in that language. If there's two separate things, we are describing God using adjectives with different words. And these words have different meanings. You've just said yourself, B is different to C. So they are not tautological, which means that they're not describing the same thing. And if they're not tautological, you cannot say everything is this, God has one attribute, or there's no attributes of God, that no attributes of God exist. That's impossible. It's a contradiction. You have to understand it's a contradiction. You can't say God's power. You can't say God's knowledge is X. God's choice is Y, yet God's knowledge and God's power, choice are the same. That's a logical contradiction. Impossible. Impossible.
Aspects. If the Torah was worded in a way that there was no apparent tautology, would it be understandable by the people to whom God has given it? So we said the Torah says that God has knowledge, power, and so on.
Yes.
And surely it seems to me that in order for Moses to convince the Jewish people that what they have is a coherent doctrine that makes sense, it feels the need to explain features of God. It can't explain God's essence. It can't say what He is, but it can say that He's what He's not. Maybe.
But what you're describing is what is referred to in systematic theology as negative attributes. So, for example, if I were to use the example of pre-eternality or post-eternality, I say God is not X. He doesn't have a beginning. God does not have a beginning, therefore He's pre-eternal. God does not have an end, therefore He's post-eternal. All right, so that's a separate kettle of fish, if you like, a separate line of inquiry of describing God in positive terms. And when you're talking about God in choice, or the choice of God, or the knowledge of God, we're not describing God in negative terms. We're describing Him in positive terms. And so from that perspective, it's actually disanalogous. But let me just get, let's get straight to the point, right? Already we've talked about divine simplicity. You said already that the Mu'tazilis agree with this. It's a group of Islamists that are pretty much extinct now. No problem. You agree with the Mu'tazilis. But so far, you haven't... no problem.
Yeah.
say you agree with the Mu'tazilis.
Yeah.
So far, no problem. Become Muslim. I'm not going to say become Mu'tazili. I'm not going to say that. But I mean,
you're being disingenuous.
No. I don't believe in what you said.
Exactly.
I've just refuted it. Anyway, look.
No.
Having said that, now the second part of this discussion, where I think more pertinent here, because you would agree with me, wouldn't you, Josh?
Yes.
That if God told us clearly in the Torah that this is how to describe me.
Yes.
That these ways in which I'm suggesting to you, for example, to do these attributes, would be something you would accept. If Moses said to you, God is all knowledgeable, that's different to the fact that he's all powerful. Would you accept it if Moses came to you and said that?
If Moses came and said to me
Yes.
that he's
The knowledge of God,
knowledge is separate from power.
not fully separate, but in the sense that they are two different adjectives, yes.
That they are two different adjectives
Yes.
in language?
Yes.
Or they are distinct from each other.
These are
in
two
theory?
separate attributes. God has attributes, and he has an attribute of knowledge, and he has the attribute of power. Would you
If
accept it?
Moses said it to me,
Yeah, would you accept it?
not sure, maybe.
Okay, so this is disbelief. What you just said there, and you're a heretic. No, honestly, if Moses himself, if is disbelief of Judaism to say that if Moses said to you X or Y, and you know he says Moses,
If
you believe
Wednesday is Thursday,
If Moses is speaking,
Yeah.
it's different between Moses speaking on his own behalf and Moses speaking as if...
no, he's saying it's from God. Let's say he's saying it's from God. I'm saying he's saying it's from God. What you would reject?
That's like saying, well, if Moses comes to you and says that Wednesday is Thursday, should you believe him? It's nonsense, because Moses would not say something.
No, but
which is not true.
what you've said is the equivalent of Wednesday equals Thursday.
No, that's
Anyway,
exactly
look,
what you've said.
no,
You're saying
look,
if Moses comes,
let people
which is
decide.
contradictory to what he said before, well then, should we listen to him now?
Okay, see, this is the disbelieving way which the Quran actually attacks about Jewish clergy. Actually, to be honest with you, فَلِمَ تَقْتُلُونَ أَنْبِيَاءَ اللَّهِ why'd you kill the prophets of God? Why'd you do this? Why'd you do that? You still have the same remnants of the old clergy, Jewish clergy, who disbelieving notions. Anyway, now let's see how sincere you are. Honestly, the Quran says
mean nothing to us.
it doesn't matter.
They mean nothing to us.
They will on the day of judgment. Let's see it. No, honestly, they will. What Rabbi Joseph Albo? You know him?
Yeah, the Sefer Ikrim.
You know him?
The Sefer Ikrim.
Okay, listen to what Rabbi Joseph Albo.
You're going to read it in context or out of context? Because I've heard it.
Look, please.
Yeah?
Please.
Okay, fine.
Please. If you think that something I'm going to read is out of context, it's upon you to provide how I've decontextualized or otherwise distorted the notion. But let me finish.
With the pre-agreement
Yeah,
before you read it,
yeah.
that I'm not a walking encyclopedia.
No problem.
And I do not have a smartphone.
Well,
after you've read it, are we able to go on
you can-
Safaria and look at the context itself?
Absolutely, we
on
can
your
do it
phone?
whatever you like.
Great.
Well, on his phone, on my phone, on anybody's phone. So he said to us, ladies and gentlemen, before, that if you find me something in the Talmud that indicates to the fact that a prophet can come after Moses and that he will be given the right to abrogate the law, that he will accept it. Now I'm going to read something to you from his authority. Joseph Albo wrote, accordingly, if his mission is proved in the same manner as was that of Moses, talking about the prophet, the new prophet that come after Moses, listen carefully. It is proper to listen to the second prophet, even if he desires